英語聞き流し10分間、名作リスニング、英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語は、ホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com
Just clearing your eyes. My father was an attentive father. He treated me so nicely throughout my childhood. My mother didn't like how he treated me because she believed he was just spoiling me. Every time he did a nice thing to me, she got angry. To avoid her anger, he had learned to give me a treat without her presence. Near my home was a temple famous for the 5-storied pagoda, and a fair was held along the approach to it once a month. A relative of ours had a booth at the fair, and my father helped carry merchandise every month. He never forgot to get some toys for me there when his work was done. There was no greater pleasure for me than seeing him entering the house, waving some playhouse items to me. Of course, he was scolded by my mother when she caught it. I usually slept beside my grandparents, and I had suffered from chronic insomnia in my childhood. Once in a while, I had a happy occasion to sleep with my parents when my grandparents were on their trip. On one of those occasions, my mother was taking a bath when my father came to futon next to me. Since my parents didn't know about my insomnia, he was surprised I was still awake. He thought I couldn't sleep because I was too hungry. Not to be caught by my mother, he stealthily got out of the room, sneaked into the kitchen, made a rice ball, and brought it to me. He told me to finish it before my mother came out of the bathroom. Seeing me devouring it, he said that he had never made a rice ball by himself before and didn't know how. It was surely the ugliest rice ball, but the most delicious one I had ever had. My mother also didn't like to see me cry. She had told me not to cry because crying made me look like an idiot. While my little sister cried all the time, I tried not to as hard as I could. But as a small child, I sometimes couldn't help it, and my mother would get angry with me for crying. In those cases, my father always said to me, "You're not crying, are you? You're just clearing your eyes, right?" I hadn't noticed until recently that there are the exact words in my song Sunrise. I've put his words unconsciously. POW. Once, on the festival for the local shrine of my hometown, my favorite grandfather on my mother's side and I were talking alone at the front yard of my house. He knew a lot about plants and taught me the names of trees in the yard. There was a rooftop space above the garage, and it was surrounded by a fence. We went up the rooftop, and my grandfather began to climb the fence. I tried to stop him, but he said he could walk along the top of the fence. He was a war veteran and had been a POW in Russia for many years. In those days, according to him, Russian soldiers made POWs climb up tall chimneys and shot them from the ground for fun. His fellow POWs fell or got shot to death. Luckier men continued to climb up and survived. My grandfather was one of the latter. Although he was old and a little drunk after the festival meal, he balanced himself and walked on the narrow fence, which was merely 4 inches wide and 13 feet above the ground. Watching him easily walking on the fence, I understood how dreadful his life as a POW was. This must be a cinch for him compared to forced acrobatics. He jumped off the fence and said, smiling, "See, it's easy," while I was crying for many reasons. A prodigy. My great-grandmother was a geisha. She grew up in a remote village surrounded by the mountains and left home for a big city to become a geisha. She had a daughter by a patron and died right after she gave birth. The daughter was my grandmother on my mother's side. She didn't remember her mother at all and didn't know her father either. No one still knows who her father is, except that he was a rich and powerful name. She was taken in and raised by her mother's parents at their home in the mountains, but for various reasons, she was soon handed over to one relative to another. She lived in countless different homes of her relatives and changed her school for innumerable times in her childhood. At every school she attended, she was the smartest honor student and had never dropped to second. One of her relatives' homes where she lived for a while was my grandfather's. Years after she left, he told his parents that he wanted to marry her. She got married with him at the age of 16 and moved in his house again as his wife. She settled down and got her family at long last. But only 5 years later, my grandfather was drafted for World War II, and she was left with her 2 daughters, one of which is my mother, and her in-laws. A former prodigy with no home and no parents found herself working hard as a farmer every day in the fields with her in-laws.
Audiobook, The Family in Kyoto, One Japanese Girl Got Freedom by Hidemi Woods on sale at online stores or apps. Apple Books, Google Play, Audible, 43 available distributors in total. Audiobook, Living in Kyoto by Hidemi Woods. Now on sale in online stores. 44 available distributors. Apple, Google Play, Amazon Audible, or else.
大好評。ヒデミウッズがデザインしたとってもかわいいオリジナルグッズが手に入る。トートバッグ、缶バッジ、ステッカー、T シャツ、トレーナー、パーカー、文具、その他いろいろ、エリゼン .com で見てみてね。erizen.com erizen.com エリゼン .com。
英語聞き流し10分間名作リスニング英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロードその他の物語はホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com